please, please welcome our lovely panel and our moderator, Kim Stein with GSSI. I'll hand it over to Kim.
Thanks, Rachel. Can you hear me? Am I on? Am I on?
Yep.
Okay, these guys can hear. Okay, I can hear it now. Thank you for joining us. Some of you may have been at our morning education session and heard a lot of great information from these guys. Some of you may not. And so since I don't know how many of you were here in the morning and may just have questions and are here brand new to hear some of the information, I'm going to introduce our speakers. They're going to give some tips in some particular areas of recovery that they're passionate about. And then we're going to open it up to questions from you guys. And hopefully you'll have lots of questions. If you don't, I'll have some more that we can throw out. So I'm really happy to have with us today, first, Jamie Meeks is the Director of Sports Nutrition for the New Orleans Pelicans and the Saints. So she has some good basketball and football background and was at LSU before moving down to New Orleans, back home to New Orleans, right? Home. And then we have Casey Smith with us. He is the head athletic trainer from the Dallas Mavericks. He's about to start his 14th season with the team. Prior to the Mavericks, he was with the Suns and Arizona State. And next we have Mark O'Neill, the Director of Medical Operations and athletic trainer for the Chicago Cubs. He has been there for 13 years, and before that, 12 years with the Cardinals. So a lot of Major League Baseball experience and knowledge here, so pick his brain. And then down on the end, we have Josh Hingst, who is the head strength and conditioning coach and sports dietitian with the Philadelphia Eagles. He's starting his 5th season with the Eagles, and prior to that, he was in Jacksonville with the Jaguars and at Nebraska and Florida State. So you can see we have a mix of a lot of professional experience and collegiate experience here with us today. So I'm going to kick it off with Jamie. She's going to talk some nutritional recovery, and then we'll go on down the road to talk some sleep and hydration and some modalities.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us.
I'll stay over here.
I have a loud voice. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the nutrition side of recovery. Obviously, recovery just from all aspects, athletic training, sleep, nutrition, very important. But when it comes to nutrition, different components, different macronutrients, carbohydrate, proteins, and then the hydration, which Josh will hit on, very, very important. Once a high-intensity workout, game, competition, whatever it may be, that's when it's time to recover. And we usually tell the athletes, your workout isn't complete until you get some recovery nutrition in you. That's when you're fully complete. So really focusing on getting some good calories in these athletes, within 30, 60 minutes, some good carbohydrates, some good proteins, and again, keeping it simple. In our session, that's really what I stressed on. A lot of people try to think of sport nutrition and make it more complicated than it needs to be, and really just the gist of it is getting calories in. So our focus, with the Saints and the Pelicans, and even back when I was at LSU with the collegiate athletes, is, really their bodies are always in recovery mode, because even though they may have an off season, they're still training during that off season. So there really isn't a day off. So they're in full recovery mode every single day of their lives, especially these professional athletes. So getting some good nutrition in post-workout, whatever they may be doing. Some examples, I'll just give you some real life examples. When it comes to real food, you can do sandwiches, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, turkey wraps. You can do protein shakes, fruit and yogurt smoothies, trail mix, things of that nature, just to get, and that's within 30, 60 minutes, until they can actually sit down to a good, wholesome meal. Again, there's certain different grams of protein and carbohydrates. Again, that's more individualized. Again, the more bigger the athlete, obviously their numbers are going to be a little bit higher. So that's on a more individualized basis. But all in all, when it comes to recovery nutrition, it's going to really just help them delay fatigue for the next session, really just help them train more efficiently, prevent injury, and then also help their immune system. So that's why it's important, post-workout, post-anything, get some good nutrients into their system.
Thanks.
Good.
Should we stop here? Are there any questions specific for nutrition? All right, Casey, on to you.
Okay. Good afternoon. We get a lot of questions, from our athletes, the same that you get from your athletes. It's like, hey, what can I do to, improve my health? What can I do to improve my performance? Or what supplement should I take, this or that? And I always tell, especially our young players, like, well, I have a supplement, one supplement that will, increase your human growth hormone levels, will decrease your resting heart rate, will improve your immune system, will improve your cardiovascular system, improve your mood. They're like, great, perfect, what is it? I'm like, it's getting regular sleep at regular intervals. And they're like, oh, that's not what I meant. And we're like, well, no, it's not very sexy, but that's one of the biggest things that we preach, and one of the consistency of messages that we try to have is that it appears to have as big an impact on all areas of health and recovery, especially in athletics, than almost any other thing. It's right on par, with nutrition and hydration and all those things being equal. That everyone wants a silver bullet, everybody wants a magic pill, and that's the magic pill. It can do all those things. We try to work diligently with people about kind of bedtime protocols. We tell them work on to get into a habit, to get electronic devices turned off, to dim some lighting, things like that, which all sound really simple to all of us, and we've all heard before. But it's amazing how effective they can be if you put them in practice and start to make some small daily changes with that. So that's one of my hot buttons, especially for our sport. We're playing, it's an average of about 3.4 games a week. We never play consecutive games in the same city when we're traveling, things like that. So, the small areas that we can hone in and that we can really make consistent, and we've seen big benefits with.
Great. Thank you. Any sleep-related questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yeah, she asked what the optimal sleep time is, the amount of sleep, and what we've found is that it's highly variable, but it's always more than 7 hours. Some people it can be up to 9 hours, but it usually falls within that 7 to 9 hour range.
Any others? Okay, we'll move on to Mark to talk modalities.
Modalities. Is it on? Can you hear me?
Yep, there you go.
Wow. Okay. When we were in the morning presentation, we were talking about like facilities and things, and I've always challenged ourselves, especially with the Cubs. We had at Wrigley Field, we had some of the worst facilities, and then now we've got a pretty modern facility, but challenging ourselves to use resources that we didn't have. I mean, now we're using cryotherapy, infrared saunas, hyperbaric chambers, all kinds of hydrotherapy, compression units. I mean, you walk around this facility, you can see probably you could probably purchase any type of modality you want. Obviously, for us, and we take a lot of pride in tissue and just getting to know our players, getting to work with them. And I mean, our hands to me are the most important modality we have to use. That and I have a very broad definition of modality because I think our mouth is as well as just understanding, getting feedback, and utilizing as many different resources that we can at our disposal, whatever it might be. If it's just a cold plunge, if it's a cold river, whatever it might be. But I mean, taking advantage of those modalities that you have at your level. That was kind of uncomfortable talking about that because I know some of the things that we do have. A lot of people don't have access to that. Mm-hmm. So if there's any questions on any modalities, I'll give as many tips as I can.
Any modality questions?
I'm sure we'll come up with it again.
Mm-hmm. Okay, on to Josh. Some hydration wisdom.
Yeah. So I was addressing the hydration question. I guess hydration, I like it because it's that word that every one of us is preaching, right? But then it's like, how do you define it? Well, what does it mean to be hydrated? Are you a good hydrator? Am I? What is it? And for me, I think the simple definition, or what I really go back to, is there's a John Wooden wrote a book that says you haven't taught until you have learned. And so if you ask your athletes, I always think about this. If I asked my athlete this, would he be able to tell me? So with that, the rule, or the general rule I use, is half your body weight in ounces per day is kind of the baseline. That's what I need, whether I'm working out or not working out. So if I'm 200 pounds, I got to drink 100 ounces. What does that look like? I'm getting enough fluids. On top of that, then, I usually coach, obviously it's somewhere between 16 to 32 ounces per hour of activity. So that's the second nugget that I want an athlete to be able to repeat back to me. Well, how many fluid ounces do you need per hour? 16 to 32, erring on the high side of things, and then using that as a general good range rule of thumb. You know, we used the specific gravity, urine-specific gravity. We tested every player every day for about 3 years straight, so I know all about that. And urine-specific gravity, it does have some weaknesses in terms of, you know, an athlete could obviously have a low number, which would suggest they're hydrated, but maybe intracellularly they might not be there. So there is a little bit of limitation there. But the one thing I will say that the urine-specific gravity testing did for us is it promoted this habit of hydration. So basically, guys knew how much they had to drink in order to get a low enough number on that USG test so that we would quit bugging them about getting hydrated. So in hindsight, if I was going to use it, I always think about maybe rolling it out for a week straight with our rookie players. All right, let's test their urine-specific gravity for a week straight, get them in this pattern of drinking and hydrating, and then maybe go from there. Do you need to do it every day? Probably not. It's probably not a good thing. Your athletes might resent you by the end of that, but anyway, and they will probably find a way to cheat the test. So that would be another one. But aside from that, then you also have to look at the electrolyte balance stuff. And I think that's particularly important in football. But what we know from science is that the electrolyte losses are extremely variable and very highly variable. You have very high ends of each spectrum on terms of how much an athlete is losing. And so other than, you know, actually doing some sweat testing and knowing, it can make it difficult to do some just flat general recommendations across the board. But I would highly encourage, if you do have the resources to do it, that will give you an idea of who your sweaters and your non-sweaters are. If anything, just as a trainer, you know who your cramping prone athletes are, right? So those would be the ones that I would initially start out dosing with higher levels of sodium and electrolytes. And if they're non-crampers, then maybe it's a not issue. Or if they are, maybe those are the group that you send somewhere to get tested or take them down to one of the GSSI labs or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm. Josh, you want to talk about recovery hydration and what the recommendation is after? Ideally, your athletes would be drinking enough, right?
Yeah, certainly. So hydration recovery, everybody did the weigh-in, weigh-out test, right? And I think that's very simple, but you know, to be honest with you, I think that it's, you know, we can lose sight of how important that really is, especially for our athletes when they come in. So for every pound lost, we usually recommend about 20 ounces of fluid. So it's, 16 ounces in a pound. It's actually more than what they're actually losing in total, but that's what we have to generally shoot for. And it's best when the athletes are consuming those to take them in combination with food, because we know that carbohydrate, electrolytes, all those things help to increase absorption of fluid. So that's really important as well. And then the second thing, in terms of those weigh-in and weigh-outs, I don't think we can take for granted how important that next day weigh-in is. So let's say you have that athlete that comes in and then all of a sudden they've lost 6 or 10 pounds and they're proud of it for some reason. But if they come back in that next morning and they're still down, I tell you what, that's a guy that's looking to have some sort of heat-related problem, whether it be cramps on the minor end or a higher risk on something else.
Right. Thank you. Any questions for?
Like with that guy that does come in the next day, like what do you guys do with him then? Like as far, because I mean, they still have to probably practice.
Yeah, they still have to go out and perform.
Josh,
but
can you repeat the questions?
Yeah, so it was specifically referring to that scenario. So what do you do? Because the coach is not going to say, hey, we can't practice this guy. His weight's down and he's dehydrated. And you never want to go to a coach with that. So basically, you have to come up with a strategy for the athlete. So the first rule is, and I don't, you don't have to waterlog the athlete. I think it's just important to get them drinking consistently, to take in large fluid intakes with breakfast, and then maybe you come back and you hit another 20 ounces before practice, and then when you're at practice, your radar's up on that guy. You're, in his ear about drinking and making sure he's staying hydrated, and then just continuing the follow-up.
Any other hydration questions? Okay, one thing that we didn't get to talk about this morning, but several of you, I think almost all of you mentioned it at some point, is we have all these modalities for recovery. I think one of you said, you can walk through this expo hall and find anything, basically, right? And I consider sleep and nutrition also modalities that we use with our athletes. But with all the technology that we have and the tracking and the various, compression, cryotherapies, et cetera, sometimes one of the most powerful things you can do is just talk to your athletes and ask them how they're feeling. And especially for those of you who are at high schools or maybe small colleges where you don't have huge budgets for all this technology, the power of a wellness survey and tracking just how your athletes feel can be really powerful. So would each of you comment on just how you use maybe either a wellness survey or just kind of some subjective ways you assess recovery with your athletes? And you can just go down the line again if you want.
At the collegiate level, when I was at LSU, we used to, at their pre-participation physical, we would have a nutrition survey, real basic questions, kind of survey how their current diet is, what they think about certain foods, and it really wasn't targeting any specific things, but it just gave me an idea of that individual, favorite foods, favorite restaurants. They had little hidden questions, if any red flags when it came to eating disorders, things of that nature. But if anything kind of popped up in my mind, that's when I would kind of pull them aside, do a nutrition consult with them, get to know them a little bit more from the diet aspect. So that's what helps on the collegiate side at the pre-participation physical. It's just a basic nutrition survey, just kind of getting a feel for the athlete when it comes to food.
Okay.
For talking about discussions with your athletes and conversing with them, I think, as athletic trainers, we talk about, how consistently we interface with the athletes. We see them more than anyone else. They see us more than their families, things like that. All of these different technologies that we're using, they're trying to give a predictive value to how the athlete's feeling. But the most consistent and repeatable value is talking to the athlete. But sometimes we're in a hurry to get to practice, or they're in a hurry, this or that. But we consistently see with our players, especially that maybe you're coming into an illness or an injury risk area, when we talk to them, you're like, hey, John, how many hours did you sleep last night? Well, I slept 8. Well, how are you feeling today? Actually, I don't feel very good. Well, why not? Talk to him a little bit about what he had before to eat last night. Talk to him what he had in the morning. There's usually something there. He or she may not be aware of it because they're kind of in the mode of get to practice, get to game, get home, go to bed, do my homework, blah, blah, blah. But all of these amazing technologies are trying to predict these answers, but they're in there somewhere, and it's having that dialogue that it really can't be overstated, that you'll glean more information, trusting and knowing and understanding, your athletes in that situation.
Yeah, I think I referenced this morning, there's several research articles out there pertaining to the validity of wellness surveys, and close to 96 to 98% validity of like some sort of a wearable technology or sleep studies and things of that nature. We simply ask, how do you feel when you wake up? It's literally 5 questions. When you wake up in the morning, how do you feel? Do you feel rested? How well do you think you slept? Are you sore from yesterday's activity? Are you concerned about tonight's activity? And then I think the last one is, you feel completely ready to play tonight? And it's just so simple, 5 questions, and we take that off of everything else, that all the other analytics that we have, and put them together. But we put a ton of weight on that. But it's amazing how those wellness scores come back in. Interesting, another thing I said this morning was, we're really working on this right now. What we found, looking at some of them with someone would grade a 5 and others would grade a 3, like average or feeling great. So we've messed up on that, and we're trying to correct it right now. But one thing I make sure is that you have continuity in the way that the athletes, what that numerical score is whenever they put it in. But it's something they do every morning for us.
Do the managers take that information and consider when they're going to have an off day for them or whatnot? Or?
Yes, we use. We're very fortunate in our organization. Everybody's talked about their schedule. We play 162 games in 180 days, and if we don't listen to them, then I always say you either listen to us and let us work with you, or they're going to take a 2-week vacation. That's what I consider the disabled list. But I mean, that's why we're doing what we do. So yeah, we're very fortunate that we have a front office and management that listen to us.
We had a number of years where we did a wellness questionnaire, very similar to Mark. Basically 5 questions, trying to get some information on how that athlete felt. They graded it, 1 to 10 on different scores, and it was an interesting experience. While having the information was extremely valuable, it was great to look at and have. I almost felt like we made our athletes less resilient by asking them every single day. It was amazing. It's all of a sudden, how am I feeling? All of a sudden, yeah, maybe I'm not feeling that great. I'm starting to talk my way out of sort of being this competitor, this athlete, this person that I want all of our guys to be. And I actually, in hindsight, kind of felt like after 3 years of the information and collecting it, that it almost kind of turned a little bit for us in terms of having it. And I think that's, like Casey and everybody said, and Mark said this earlier in the talk at the beginning, he calls it the smell test, right? All this data and these numbers and stuff, like, we're basically just trying to gather that stuff to see if something's up. Something might be, be a little fishy. And then that's where the relationship component comes in. And sometimes I don't know that we need these cute little 5, our little app-filled questionnaire to get that information. Like, we should, as coaches and trainers, be observant enough. Like, for me, I know when I go in that weight room, and if there's not a lot of chatter, a lot of energy, if there's no noise, I know these guys are tired. They're fatigued. Like, there's just no juice today. Like, I can tell going into the workout where they are physically from a fatigue standpoint. And that, that's one example, but there's many, and there's a lot of things that I think we can get behind the scenes to get the information that we need to kind of prove our smell test a little bit in terms of where our guys are at.
Any questions from the audience? Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so she asked, from the initial survey, would I re-give the survey, say, mid-season? For example, her volleyball team, just kind of their morale went down if they were losing, things of that nature. We never resubmitted the survey, but if we did kind of see change in attitude or eating habits, things like that, coaches would actually bring me in to do more of a team talk. If it was more of an individual thing, then that's where individual consults would come in. So again, it's more of just kind of being observant, watching trends and different habits, if they're changing. But understand, like, that mid-season slump, it happens, especially if you're not winning. But yeah, yeah. So,
and I think we also know when our athletes have difficult times, whether it's difficult travel, whether it's finals week, whether it's, we can identify areas in the schedule that are going to be more problematic for rest, recovery, and readiness than others. So, as clinicians, we need to be proactive about that. If Josh says, hey, we're going to the West Coast twice in 3 weeks, he knows that's a tougher training, period for them. If you've got extra inning games, 3 times in a week, that may change your planned rest or things like that. So, it's important to not just plan it out all at the beginning, but just kind of sense it as it goes along as well.
Yeah, you definitely have to modify. It's like, I call it pinch points. And like with some of the sleep information that we have larks and owls. And when we first go to the West Coast, we got the West Coast, the owls are going to play the first day or so, to everybody can acclimate to the time change to try to get the most productivity out of them. And just, you're exactly right. You have to constantly, especially when you travel, nationally like we do. It's you have to work with it, but I mean, you have to constantly. You do with your kids. I'm always adapting.
Any other questions from the audience? Yes.
I work with a lot of international kids, and I guess I'm just wondering what you recommend as far as I'm probably getting them to eat and drink and stuff like that, because they're not used to what we have over here. So I don't know if you have any tips to work with
Right. So she asked, she works with a lot of international athletes and trying to get them to drink certain things or eat certain things, maybe just different taste preferences, I'm guessing. Any suggestions on that? So what I would suggest is maybe grabbing a bunch of food products. I don't know if you're talking about snack products or just food in general, but maybe just doing a nice like day of taste testing. Like, here are some nice nutrition bars, here's some cereals, here's some yogurt, here's some crackers, whatever, and kind of lay it out on a nice table, make it like a point. Like, today is taste testing day. We're going to make you try new things. We want to hear what you like, what you don't like, and maybe that way, you know, maybe they're just scared of tasting something new. So that could be an issue as well. But making a point to show them that you're there to listen to them and that nutrition is so important that we want to find something that you do like.
Dive into what they're doing as well. An interesting thing for us with the Latin American players, they come over and we always try to change them into our diet. But think of what our Latin American players eat. They eat rice, beans, and chicken. Now, what more would you want for your athlete if you could have 3 things to do? So, you know, it's almost like we would rather bring your diet to us with some of the stuff that we're doing. So try to adapt. Look at what they're used to, and try to find a way to blend it and maybe not supplement, but complement the things that you're asking for. But I would look into their diet and what they do like and see how well you can incorporate it.
Other questions from the audience? Don't be shy. Okay, well, I'll throw another one out for you. For each of you, what do you find is your biggest challenge in the recovery space and helping your athletes kind of stay as fresh as possible, non-injured as much as possible throughout, you know, y'all have long seasons. What is your biggest challenge?
I would say in general, my biggest challenge, especially working with professional athletes, is just gaining their trust of my knowledge so that they understand that I'm there for them and know what's best for them. And, you know, I'm not going to ever tell them to do something that they don't want to do or it's bad for them, things like that. But really just gaining their trust and listening to them. You know, just everybody's body is so different and everybody's preferences are so different. So, yeah, they have so much research of what should be done. And so, yes, it's educating them on what has been shown in the research, but then again, what if it doesn't work for that particular athlete? So again, it's just like listening to the athlete, trying to make recommendations, what fits them best, and again, just gaining their trust and throughout this long season where they can come to you and ask you anything. And you know, when it comes to nutrition or athletic training, whatever it may be, it's just that trust, I think, is truly important.
For me, it's probably the consistency. I spoke a little bit this morning about not letting your signal, whatever signal you're trying to give your athletes, lost in the noise. And the noise, you know, for us is, you know, travel, wins and losses, family life, things like that. I don't like to use the term work-life balance with our athletes because they've chosen a career that it's integrating life into their work. Their work is going to come first. You know, their work is, it's demanding, it's every day, it's performance-based, you know, things like that. So it's the consistency of the message and helping them integrate, you know, real life into this, you know, incredibly rewarding but also incredibly difficult work and career that they've chosen.
Thank you. Mark?
I think for me it's to, I think you mentioned it this morning as well, is not letting them become too dependent on one thing. Some of these modalities we talked about, we don't have them on the road. You know, becoming you know, be aware of what you're putting in your body, you know, optimize your nutrition, you know, nothing better than a good cardio flush, foam roll, good dinner, get a good night's sleep, and having that be enough at times, rather than being dependent on, you know, a pill or a chamber or anything like that. It's just it's looking at it from more of a, and I don't want to say a holistic point of view, but really there's so much out there for these guys at this level to try to get them where they're not just so dependent on any one thing.
I was going to actually just echo off what Mark was saying in terms of the dependence. You know, I think it's all these additional recovery modalities, the athletes need to be, you know, understand that they're supposed to be reserved for special periods of overreaching or over, you know, a competition, let's say there's a short window between one competition to the next, like those are the times when these recovery modalities they weren't designed to be an everyday thing, and our athletes will get calloused to the response to those recovery modalities if they do incorporate them every day. So we need to, that's one thing where I think we struggled a little bit because we initially influxed all this recovery and we sort of created our own monster. And now it's a matter of educating and pulling back and kind of helping athletes to understand what and when.
Great. Thank you. Well, we've used up our 30 minutes. Are there any last questions from our audience here? All right. Well, thank you for your time, and join me in thanking our speakers.